Hello and welcome to today's episode of Courage Permission Slip. I am your host, Kia, and today I am really excited and glad to welcome a friend, a colleague, a fellow confidence nerd, which I know we're going to talk about this in spades, but Toni Purry to the show. And before we dive in, I want to tell you just a little bit more about her. And her resume is extensive, let me just say. Toni is an award-winning public relations veteran whose career spans over 2 decades. She's a story, speech, and media trainer who helps leaders and executives take the stage with confidence. She is also the author of my hype book, which, by the way, is sitting on my bookshelf as we speak. And fun fact, and Toni, I still remember when you told me this story. I remember where we were. I remember what the weather was like when you told me this. This is such a fun fact. Toni made glass shattering history by becoming the first Black woman to ever win the Miss Alabama title. So we have royalty in the house. Welcome to the show, Toni.
Thank you so very much. I do remember that conversation when I think we were at a restaurant in Culver City.
Yes, meet in Paris.
There we go. That's exactly it.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, it's not a story that I often lead with, just because the pageants were something that I did many years ago, and it was a means to an end for me, for scholarship money, and then became about something a little bit bigger than that. But it's one of those things that just sort of happens to come up in conversations, and then people are like, "Wait, what? You were Miss Alabama?" Like I was the first African American to earn a Miss Alabama title,
Yes.
and it's something that I'm very proud of all these years later.
Yes. Well, I was proud for you. And I remember I had a clutch my pearls moment sitting at the dinner table, like, what? Like, I can't believe this. How did I not know this?
I know.
Oh my gosh. Well, so fun. And maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. But, I still remember the first time that I met you at that bra event where you were talking about my hype book, right? And, and all the circumstances that led up to that, right? And all the permission that you had to give yourself to do what you did that led to the writing of that book. So I just wonder if you could just share a little bit about that, because I feel like that is, it's such a important story. So just tell a little bit about how that sequence of events came together.
Sure. Well, as you know, I ran a public relations agency, a travel, tourism, and lifestyle public relations agency for 10 years. And for 8 of those years, I really loved the work that I was doing. But it was around year 8 where I found myself feeling a shift and not as excited about what I was doing, and wanting to find other things to stimulate me and motivate me and excite me. And it took me a couple of years to finally say, I don't really want to do this anymore. And part of that was because we were a very successful agency. We've won over 50 awards. I had a rock star team of employees. I had a really impressive roster of clients. I was doing the thing that all of us endeavor to do when we say we're going to start a business. But I was unfulfilled. I just was not finding joy in it anymore. I was dialing it in. It wasn't a challenge to me anymore. I always say I liken it to when you're dating that person and they're really a great person, but when they blink, you kind of want to sock them in the face. They did nothing wrong, but you're just like, this is not working anymore. And it's not you, it's me, really. And it was my need to do something new. And I struggled to give myself permission to walk away from a thriving business. But what happens when you don't give yourself that permission? As you know, any type of business, it reciprocates the love that you put into it. And I was not putting very much love into the business, which really caused a strain on the business. And so I eventually decided to transition employees over to contract employees. And then I moved out of our beautiful creative office space, and we all worked remotely. And I did that for a little while, and then finally realized I just didn't want agency life anymore. In the midst of this, I found myself completely depleted of confidence because
Mhm.
I didn't realize how much my agency, my work, my business,
Yeah.
my title, my
Mhm.
having a team, my having really great clients, those were a mantle for me. And they made me really proud to walk around in the world, and to
Mm.
be about the business of the day.
Yeah.
And when I didn't have that, I found myself feeling really empty. And
Mhm.
so I'm suffering this major crisis of confidence at this moment. And my husband is watching a documentary about Muhammad Ali. And I'm walking through the living room, and I'm like really captivated by his confidence. I'm
Mhm.
trying to understand, how did this man maintain his confidence in the face of defeat? How did he maintain it when the country despised him because he didn't support the
Yes.
Vietnam War?
Yes.
How did he maintain it even when he was stricken with Parkinson's disease?
Mm.
Every image that you
Mhm.
think of
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali is this man of confidence.
Yeah.
And a couple of clips later, I see Boondini Brown, his hype man, his
Mhm.
corner man, and right before Ali is going into his fight, in his face, ardently yelling and reminding him of his knockouts, his wins, that he is the greatest, he is the champ. And my thought was, well, if we all had a hype man reminding us of our wins, we'd have that kind of confidence as
Mhm.
well. But I
Mhm.
had a second thought, was I need to make myself a hype book. I've always been a journaler. So I pulled a blank journal off my shelf, and I just started journaling in great detail about my abilities, my confidence, my gifts. I mean, I'm sorry, my abilities, my talents, the
Mhm.
things that I had done that made me really proud of myself. And when I tell you, that was a game changer for me, the things that I had won, things that I had succeeded at, things
Mhm.
from big contracts that we had won to really tough conversations that I had to have, and I actually did it, and I was afraid of. Um, Pro bono work that my agency had done over the years, even running the LA Marathon. It was me writing down what made me personally proud, what not society said was
Mhm.
a success or
Yeah.
great, but what made me personally feel proud. And I have to tell you, within 2 days of doing that, there was this ascension of confidence that rose up in me,
Mm.
because I was now looking at myself through my success lens versus this
Mhm.
harsh critical lens that I think we tend to give way too much mental
Yes.
real estate to. And in the process of doing that, a girlfriend sent me a text message and asked me what I was doing. And I said, I'm making a hype book. And she's like, what's a hype book? I'm like, it's the best thing ever. You have to do it. It's when you sit down and take inventory of
Yeah.
your gifts and your talents and your wins. She said, Toni, that's amazing. Everybody needs one.
Yeah.
And I said, I know. That's why you have to do it. And she's like, no, Toni, everybody needs one. And you need to write that book.
Yes.
I thought, oh, and that became the thing that I did for the next 9 months, writing what is now this guided motivational journal that is called my hype book. And it really is just that place in the world where
Mhm.
you say, I did that. I'm
Mhm.
proud of myself. And you make it a habit of seeing yourself in that space, as opposed to, ruminating over the things that are our setbacks and our failures and our
Mhm.
mistakes.
Mhm. That is so important, and it's so timely because I recently had a crisis of confidence, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And, feelings of failure were popping up. And I let myself be in that for a moment. And then I
Sure.
had to remember, but no, but look at all the things that have worked in your favor, right? Like, look at all the
Exactly.
things that you've done. And oh, by the way, you're not a failure because you keep
You're
going,
still
right?
going.
Like that's
Exactly.
the only way that anything's a failure is if you stop. And
Right.
so I did have to do exactly what, or at least had to start thinking through. I didn't write it down yet, but
Mhm.
you have to start again looking at things through your success lens, as you
Yes.
said, and thinking about what has gone well.
Right.
What am I capable of doing? Right.
Right.
And so that book is so important for that
Oh,
exact reason, because it's so easy for us to brush aside the things that we've done well or do
right.
well or have accomplished. So I so all these years later, still so appreciate that you wrote
Oh,
that book because it is
that's so
important and
nice
that
to
you put
hear.
that message out.
I really appreciate that. We tend to do things and then we're on to the next. We have an
Yes.
accomplishment and we're on to the next, on to the next. We've got a
Right.
laundry list of things that we
Hmm.
want to get done. And we do those things. But if you think about the amount of time that we spend thinking about those achievements
Yeah.
and the amount of time that we spend thinking
Hmm.
about our setbacks and what we
Hmm.
think are our failures and missteps and those things, it's usually, very imbalanced. And if
Yes.
we train ourselves to spend at least the equal amount of time, preferably more, but if we can start out with just equal amount of time of focusing on our wins and our accomplishments and those things that we're proud of, if we can do that, as much as we do the other, I think we're
Right.
setting ourselves up for true success and also just feeling really, really proud of who we are as individuals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to quickly like go back to something that you mentioned earlier as you were telling this tremendous story,
Sure.
where having your agency and you were struggling with the notion of giving yourself permission to let it go.
Mhm.
What was that thing? Like, what was the thing that was like, I can't do it. I can't do it, that you had to bargain with?
Part of it was I had been calling this company my baby for
Right.
8, 9, 10 years. It was my
Mhm.
baby. It was the
Mhm.
thing. I don't have children, so it
Mhm.
literally was the thing that I created and birthed and groomed and built,
Mhm.
and it was really beautiful. And so it felt like, here I grew this baby and now I don't want it anymore. Nothing about it seemed to make sense. And
Mhm.
also, my work was, I mean, it's still work. Running a business is work, and even PR, as glamorous as it may sound
Mhm.
on the outside, it's a lot of work. But my work involved, flying journalists in and taking them on these luxurious excursions,
Yeah.
wine
Yes.
paired dinners, and really cool trips to
Mhm.
Fiji and Cabo and
Mhm.
all of these places that we represented. So it was very hard for me to tell anybody that I don't want to do this anymore. I could just hear my girlfriends cry me a river. You don't want to go to another, you
Mm.
know, um, multi-course gourmet meal, entertaining journalists to show off your star chefs. And it seemed ridiculous. It seemed ridiculous
Mm.
that here I'm living the dream. I'm making great money. Our
Mhm.
work is award winning. We are really growing by word of mouth. It's all the things that we endeavor. But after I had, 10 years in the industry, actually more than 10 years in the industry before I launched my agency.
Mhm.
I launched my agency when I was 40.
Mhm.
So I had
Mhm.
been,
Mhm.
working many, many
Yeah.
years. And then to have this agency. So it was a long time doing
Yeah.
PR. And
Right.
I needed to shift. And it just seemed countercultural to walk away from this
Mhm.
sure thing that
Mhm.
we work so hard to build, to do something else. And here's the other thing. I think probably to really answer your question, the biggest challenge was, it's one thing to say, I don't want to do this because I want to do this. I don't
Mhm.
want to do this and I have no clue what else I want to
Right.
do. But what I do know, I don't want to do that anymore. And it
Yeah.
wasn't anything wrong with it. There wasn't
Mhm.
anything in particular that
Mhm.
the industry was changing and evolving, but that wasn't enough. It wasn't it. It just was not fulfilling me
Yeah.
anymore. And
Yeah.
I had a hard time saying, how can something that fulfilled me for so long
Mhm.
not do it for
Mhm.
me? And I
Mhm.
not even be able to, in PR, we kind of fix things. We're sort of fixers. We find a way to make it work. I couldn't find a way to make myself love what I was doing anymore.
Mm.
So all of that really hindered me from, I had too many
Mm.
good reasons to stay, seemingly good reasons to stay,
Yeah.
than leaving because I couldn't even say what it is that I wanted to leave to go
Yeah.
towards. But
Yeah.
that brought me to this place of surrender of, maybe I don't know, maybe I'm in a season where I don't know the next
Mhm.
destination, but
Mhm.
I'm willing to get up and take steps every day. And that
Yeah.
was how I I finally, did give myself permission to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And it was after um, doing my own version of my hype book that I said, instead of looking at this as, I failed my company, I failed all of this that I worked for, I was able to look at all of what I have done and said, wow, this is an amazing springboard. you
Sure.
know, I have
Right.
all of this to stand on
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
to jump off of to figure out what I want to do next. And that shift in mindset became a game changer for me.
Yeah. Well, and so a couple things you said that stand out to me. The first is you doing that first kind of phase of the My Hype booking,
Hmm.
of really identifying that you have built a blueprint, right?
Right.
Like, even if you don't know what's coming next, you are. And another guest said this, like, success leaves breadcrumbs, right? Like,
Yes.
you already have the
Yes.
map for, okay, like, I did this thing, I built it, it was successful. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but here is proof
Absolutely.
positive that when I do figure it out, I can do that. I can do this
Exactly.
again. I can just take
Exactly.
this blueprint and put a new, you know, coat of paint on it for the
Right.
next thing, right? So that's the
Yeah.
first thing that stands out to me. The other thing that comes up for people, and this was something that came up for me when I was leaving my marketing career, right? Like,
Hmm.
I've worked at Sony, I've worked with
Hmm.
global brands,
Yes.
I've been in the rooms with celebrities and, been able to work on amazing things and, have traveled and done really fun things
Right.
for the work that I've done. And looking at that, it's like, man, like, I don't want to feel ungrateful. I don't want to feel
Right.
like, because there are people that would kill,
Yes.
kill to
Absolutely.
do what I was doing, but it wasn't for me. And so, like, that's the first permission that we have to
Hmm.
give ourselves when we're thinking of making some kind of life or career shift, is just because this is great doesn't mean it has to be great for me,
Right. Or great
right?
forever.
Or great forever, right? And
Hmm.
it's still, and it, like, I still use that expertise in things that
Sure.
I do, right? So it wasn't
Absolutely.
for nothing, right? It
Exactly.
wasn't a waste, but I had to let go of those, like, golden handcuffs
Yes.
of, oh, like, I should stay in this because it looks good, it
Right.
sounds good on a resume and on my
Right.
LinkedIn profile, right? But it's not good for me any longer.
That's it.
So that was the other thing that really stood out to me, that I think many people who are thinking of leaving something that is like kind of a status symbol, right? Like a
Hmm.
sign of success and achievement, um, thinking of setting that down really holds people back from really pulling the trigger on
It
something.
does. It really does.
Yeah. So, Toni, so we've already been talking a lot about courage and permission slips and all that good stuff, but I would love to hear from you. Now that you have, um, built your blueprint, right, and you've moved on to other things, and you're continuing to evolve, right? What does the word courage mean to you when you think of it, hear it, see it?
Uh, Courage is exactly what we just said. It is permission.
Mhm.
Honestly, it's permission. It is saying I'm going to give, in spite of the fear,
Mhm.
in spite of the concern and the worry, in spite of the
Yeah,
unknown, I am going to bet on myself
yeah,
and I'm going to do it. That's
yeah.
what courage to me is. It is 100% betting on myself and
Mhm.
also betting on, I love what you were just saying um, about the breadcrumbs and the blueprint. And I didn't know how to build a PR agency when I did it,
Yeah.
but I figured it out and I did it.
Mhm.
So I'm the same person, and I'm going to come to this new phase in my life
Yeah.
with that same time type of ingenuity
Mhm.
and ability to figure it out and do my due diligence and let that work for me. So it is courage to me is 100% saying I am willing to bet on myself.
Yeah.
I'm willing to give myself the benefit of the doubt to
Mhm.
go for it. And allow myself to feel the freedom of progress over perfection and not feel like I have to get it all right in order for me to feel as proud about it as I did with what I built. Because there were many times in the process of building that I didn't feel proud or didn't feel like I was doing anything. But then when I look back over the 10 years, I'm like, wow, we really did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But don't forget those moments when I didn't feel. A quick funny story that happened when I was on my sitting in my living room floor and writing my out my first version of my hype book. When I first started the company, I decided I'm going to make $1 million because I read somewhere in either Inc. or Fast Company magazine that $1 million in your first year is success. So I'm like, we're going to make $1 million. And I launched, now granted, I launched my company in 2007. So that was right before the big, economic recession. And everybody was like, are you sure you want to start your company? And honestly, I was very naive about what a recession even meant and how it could affect me. And I was like, recession smession, we'll be fine. We're going to do great. So we did well. We built the company, we started, we launched, we moved into a beautiful office. I think our first 3 clients was a Marriott resort, an Intercontinental, and a Hyatt resort. So we were doing very well. 18 months in, I'm at my desk having a meltdown in tears because I had not made $1 million. And so my controller, who's also a friend, calls me and says, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, you just don't understand. Everybody was right. I shouldn't have started the company. We're 18 months in. I haven't made $1 million. And she's like, are you kidding me? And I said, no, I'm serious. This is just terrible. And she's like, you are thriving in a recession where companies are laying people off in droves, completely cutting their PR and marketing budgets. And you have this great team of employees. You're in this beautiful office space. You have clients calling you, asking you to represent them in spite of what's going on. And you're crying that you didn't make $1 million. And so she says, slow your roll, Oprah, you will get there. So I'm like mad at her and I'm like, you don't understand. I hang up on her. She's a friend that, we can get mad at our friends that way. She calls me a couple of hours later and she's like, are you finished having your temper tantrum? And I'm like, no. And I just don't understand why you don't get it. And she's like, I will never get it because you are doing well. And you just have your focus in the wrong place. And that was a bone of contention for us for the whole 10 years. And it wasn't until I was sitting in my floor writing out what we had really achieved and that we were a thriving business. I had a lot of regret because not only did I rob myself of being proud, but I robbed my team of relishing in what we were doing. Despite everything that was going on around us. And so it really was like, oh man, you missed a great opportunity, there. And so it has really helped me to look at things from a very different perspective now, and I've had to go back to her and apologize. She's like, I always knew it. But to tell her you were right, I just didn't see it that way. I was just so driven. And maybe I didn't exactly tell the employees that, but people, you can feel it in the air when somebody is, unsatisfied and so eager and pushing so hard.
Yeah. Well, so many, like, just the field is littered with gems right now. But something else you said, and you said it a moment ago, but we were also talking about it before we started recording, about this notion of, the expectations and feeling like there's only one way to do things because someone from a magazine or from, who's a blue check mark person from a stage that has said, this is the way that you're going to have to do it. This is, right. And it's like, no. And I have to talk myself off this ledge too. Like there are so many ways
Ways.
to achieve your goals, right? And just
Absolutely.
because you don't do the thing that someone says in a magazine, if you haven't made this amount of money by this time, then you're not doing things right, right?
Right.
Like, and not letting that be the brass ring that you
Exactly.
judge your abilities and progress against,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
So I just wanted to put a fine point on that,
Mm-hmm.
because that perfectionism, the feeling that you have to do it a certain way or
Right.
else,
Yeah.
right? The shoulding that we do, or the tyranny of
Yes.
the shoulds that,
Yes.
that it gets talked about in the confidence
Mm-hmm.
circles. Those can be real killers,
They really
real
can. They
killers.
really can. I'm always sort of annoyed with, and I get it because we want to set goals, but when I see the, 6 figure, 7 figure, 8 figure, promise to do it, I'm like, just you
Yeah.
decide for you what success looks like. You
Mhm.
decide, and decide that based on what makes you feel good
Yeah.
and proud, but try your best not to base it on what others and
Yeah.
society and
Mhm.
industry says,
Mhm.
because we are, the things that make me really happy sometimes are very different than the things that make my husband really happy. I
Sure.
can watch a warm fuzzy Hallmark movie and just be a Christmas Hallmark movie and be in my bliss. He's like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, kill me now.
Yes. Yes.
That doesn't make the movie good or bad. It just
Right.
makes it my preference.
Right.
This brings
Right.
me joy. It doesn't
Yes.
bring him, something else brings him, joy.
Yes.
So I've gotta give myself permission to
Mhm.
determine what
Mhm.
is it that makes me feel a sense of accomplishment,
Mhm.
and what are all the factors around that, because it's usually not just one thing.
Yeah.
It's not just one goal. Because I will tell you, you know what? When you get to that goal, you've already decided, when you're getting close to that goal, you've already decided what the next one is.
Mhm.
So the joy at reaching it is usually
Mhm.
short lived. So I think it has
Mhm.
to be a culmination of things that you are constantly saying, I'm proud of myself, raising your hand, turning your hand back, patting
Mhm.
yourself on the back, and
Mhm.
saying, I did that, I did that, I did that. And for these reasons, I feel accomplished. I feel
Yeah.
successful. I feel like I'm making a viable
Mhm.
contribution. And I
Mhm.
feel worthy of
Mhm.
saying, this is who I am, and this is what I do, and this is where I am, whether I am meeting those goals that society says I should,
Right.
to determine whether I'm successful or not.
Yeah. So, something that came up as you were talking, Toni, and would love to hear your thoughts on this, which, you and I have talked about at various points as well. But this whole notion, and it still kind of ties to permission, of giving yourself permission to change the goal,
Ooh,
right? Like
yes.
giving yourself permission to say, because we talked about this before the camera came on, here, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to show up in the world. And as you start taking steps toward it, and you feel this other voice, right? This
Hmm.
other little tap on the shoulder that's
Hmm.
like, but what about this, right? And giving yourself permission to listen to that voice. And if that voice is true, right,
Yeah.
or right, then giving yourself permission to maybe take your foot off the gas pedal for that
Yes.
other goal and go towards another goal.
Yes.
How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts?
I will tell you what, I have come to, after I closed my agency, and it took me a while to figure out what's the
Yeah.
next thing that I'm going to build.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done a couple of things. I really got strongly into, I still do a lot of consulting from PR, but then I started focusing on a positioning and visibility strategy, which very much ties into what I
Mm-hmm.
did, in PR. Now I was helping people launch and write their books and publish their
Mm-hmm.
books.
Mm-hmm.
That's another way
I
of
remember that.
positioning and visibility. And
Mm-hmm.
now I've really niched down to story, speech, and media
Yeah.
training, which is all of those things. It's the
Yes.
PR that I did. It's the book, pulling that confidence in order
Mm-hmm.
to take your stories to the stage. It is maybe having a book so that, that becomes the product that can sell from the stage. It is using this as a positioning tool, a thought leadership tool,
Mhm.
all of those things. What that says to me is, oh, I've just evolved and I continue to evolve. And so my big lesson in all of this has been, um, I don't have to have a thing, but what I can do is surrender to this sense of evolution that is
Yes.
happening with myself and embrace that, and not
Mhm.
make myself feel bad that I'm shifting gears or I've decided to do something different, or for fear that
Mhm.
somebody may think I'm fickle and I don't know what I'm doing.
Ooh.
Because it is when you look back that you say, what does Steve Jobs quote about? It's when you look back and you realize all the dots connected.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when I wrote the book, I thought this is very different from what I did before as a PR person. And I'm like, yeah, no, not so much, because
Mhm.
my book was about my work was about generating hype and
Yeah.
and brand confidence
Mhm.
and enthusiasm
Mhm.
around big, luxury
Yeah.
hotel brands and destinations in those
Mhm.
spaces in hospitality and tourism. My book is about how you do that for yourself. How do
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
generate that kind of hype,
Mhm.
enthusiasm, and excitement on a very personal level?
Mhm.
So while it feels like it's vastly different running an agency and writing this book, they are
Mhm.
very much tied together. And like you said, you're using many of the things from your
Yeah.
days at Sony to
Mhm.
helping you do the
Mhm.
work that you do now.
Yeah.
But when we come to that place where we say, I am evolving and I will continue to evolve. And honestly, we are in a time in life where we are given the ability to evolve because we have access to so much opportunity,
Right.
so much information. We are exposed to so many of the possibilities.
Mhm.
You know, how much would I be cutting myself off if I said I can only do one thing and I
Yeah.
got to stick to this thing for
Yeah.
the next 20 years in order
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
really, make it work?
Mhm.
I love a person that says I'm a serial entrepreneur,
Yeah.
because they've got a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
These multi-passionate people.
Mhm.
That's all about
Mhm.
evolving, and it's
Yes.
finding new things that make you happy
Yeah.
today, this week, this month, this year, that
Mhm.
may next year may not, float you in the same way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You don't know how timely this is, but also, I mean, this is so important for people to get, is that it's about evolution,
It's
right?
about
Like
evolution.
because we're always, especially now because there is so much at our fingertips, right?
Right.
And for the person that is really intentional about their check-ins, right? That
Right.
it's really intentional about that kind of like self-inventory, self-assessment, inner work. For the person that's really intentional about that, I don't think it's it's not possible to not evolve, right?
Right.
Because when you're realizing what is it that's really exciting right now, right?
Right.
Like what gives me energy, just like I talked about to you about like why this doing this show has become such a thing. Like I didn't think it was going to be, I knew it was going to be fun, but
Hmm.
I didn't know what was going to come
I
from
love
doing
it.
it.
Yeah.
And now that I've been doing it, I'm like, oh, so maybe that other thing that I thought I wanted to do, maybe this is where maybe that's where this is where that goal lives,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Sure.
But giving yourself permission to say, this is the thing that's actually working for me as opposed to that thing,
Right. Right.
right?
Right. We can't lock ourselves down
Yeah,
into these ideas that we come up with
yeah,
because our interests change, our moods change,
yes.
or we just discover. When I was in college, I did an intern. I wanted to be a lobbyist. I was certain I wanted to be
Mm,
a lobbyist. I met
mhm.
somebody that was lobbyist, and I was so impressed with
Yeah.
their work and their lifestyle and
Mhm,
the go go go. And
mhm.
so I did an internship in DC with a lobbyist, and I realized oh, I don't love lobby. I don't, this is not the
Mm.
kind of work that I
Yeah,
want to do.
yeah,
No, this
yeah,
isn't for me.
yeah.
And I'm so glad that, it's kind of why we do internships in college. It's a chance to get
Sure.
in, to see what
Mm-hmm.
it's like, to get a
Mm-hmm.
real feel for it, to
Mm-hmm.
decide what you like and what you don't like. And I
Mm-hmm.
think going through life now at this phase where we have so much opportunity is saying, it's okay that I've decided that's not exactly the thing. This over here
Yeah,
is the thing.
yeah.
Because sometimes even the pursuit of that other, it was your pursuit of speaking, on
Mm-hmm.
stages
Mm-hmm.
regularly that led you to this,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
seemingly smaller platform.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, you find out this is where the heartbeat really is and where
Mm-hmm.
you're really
Mm-hmm.
thriving and where your voice gets
Mm-hmm.
out there so much further than if you
Mm-hmm.
were, standing on one stage.
Right, right.
So I do love that we, when we give ourselves permission to say, oh, that thing that I thought was a shiny thing over there was not, it was just to drive me in that direction. But
Yeah,
it's this thing over here,
yeah.
this detour over here where I find real joy. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to sit here
Mm-hmm.
and let this work for me for as
Yeah,
long as it does.
exactly. Exactly. So Toni, we've kind of, you mentioned the magic word a little while ago, but I want to dive into it. Fear. As you are continuing to evolve, right? And as you are like, oh, maybe that's not the thing, this is the thing. What fears do you notice pop up for you now?
The biggest fear, to be quite honest, is my fear of not succeeding at the level in which I did with my agency.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that really, that's one of those things that keeps me up at night. It
Really?
really does. I battle with it because I have to say that was that. And that was even a different business model
Right.
than what I'm doing now. So why would I try to want to make this orange be the apple that the agency
Mm-hmm.
was?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's not even, well, we say that in a comparison is, kind of is our enemy when we are
Mm-hmm.
doing it in an
Mm-hmm.
unhealthy way. I can't compare my now to and be jealous of what I was before and feel like that is my bar only to
Yeah.
determine whether this is successful. So that's one thing that I fear. But even bigger than that is fearing that that become the driver that hinders me from pursuing. Because when you feel like,
Interesting.
if I don't get there, maybe I won't get there. And then you start talking yourself out of the pursuit and
Mm,
thinking, what can I come up with that I can actually look at and build and say I did the thing. I made, like, it was this just
mm,
lightning striking over here?
mm-hmm.
How do I do it again? But I struggle with that, constantly. And
Yeah.
it is it's a thing of talking myself off the ledge and saying, Toni,
Yeah.
that was what that was over there.
Yeah.
You've got to determine what you want this to be
Mm-hmm.
and be proud of what it is,
Mm-hmm.
not in comparison to that, but using the things that you learned there to feed what this new thing is.
Right. What do you think is the driver for you making that literally an apples to oranges comparison? Because as you said that, I was like, but they're completely different
Completely
paths.
different. I
Even
know.
though, as we said, even though one has evolved into the other, and you're
Right.
using your knowledge and experience to make this thing work.
Right.
What do you think is the driver for that side by side comparison?
I think because it's the one thing that I know that I did.
Mhm.
I've never been the person that, I don't struggle. There are a lot of people that have a challenge with social media because they look and everybody else life looks so, and it's probably because I worked in PR and I understand how you
Mhm.
paint the smoke screen and
Mhm.
how you know, you add the filter and you do all the things to make
Yeah.
it look really
Mhm.
beautiful and polished and presentable. So and even when I was younger, when I ran track, when I was in gymnastics, when I competed in the pageants. I wasn't so much thinking about who my competition was and what they were doing.
Right.
I was always competing against my best.
Sure.
So if I was able
Mhm.
to, do that, um, get on those, I struggled with I didn't like the uneven bars when I first started gymnastics.
Ooh, that was I hated the
I
uneven
hated
bars.
the hated the kind of hated uneven bars, and my coach would put me on them, constantly, and he knew I hated them.
Mhm.
Um, and so I do finally do something and do a really good
Mhm.
uh, 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 um, what do you call it when you come off when you
Dismount?
dismount? Couldn't remember that name. I do a really good dismount, and then I'm like, okay, now I've got to do it even better. Now I got to do it. I was not looking at what the girls around me were doing because they loved
Mhm.
the uneven bars and they were on them all the time.
Mm.
I was avoiding them. So I was my competition.
Mhm.
So my challenge has always been not what other people are doing around me. For some reason, I don't have that. I don't struggle with that comparison thing. I am comparing myself with the last thing or the
Mm.
really iconic people that I look at. I'm like, well, if they can do it, then I can do it too. And that feels so far away that it's not really a
Mhm.
comparison, it's
Mhm.
more an aspiration.
Mhm.
But my whole thing has always been I'm competing against the last thing that I did.
Yeah.
That's always been my since I was a child has been my thing.
Mhm.
And so now when I knowing that is my pattern,
Yeah.
I have to uh, realize they are two different things,
Mhm.
and the success in this is going to manifest very differently
Mhm.
than that did.
Mhm.
And don't let uh, what I see there hinder me from allowing this to be what it needs to be. Because honestly, if I am spending all my time comparing that and trying to achieve that, I am limiting this in what it has the potential to be.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And whether that is how much money it makes, how big it grows,
Mhm.
none of that. It could be just how it makes me feel about how I show up in the world and the impact that I have. The work that I do now is very, very um, personal. I work with individuals now,
Mhm.
helping them get on stages.
Mhm.
And when I tell you, you would think I was standing on stage when I see a client on stage. I am vicariously living through them. It's like I'm there. I am so in that.
Mhm.
And that kind of reward is very different than what the reward was to win a really big account with my
Sure.
agency.
Mhm.
But there's something very personal and proud that I feel when
Mm.
I see helping people find their story,
Yeah.
craft that message, put it in
Mhm.
place, get it on stage, and stand
Mhm.
up there with confidence. Oh my
Mhm.
goodness,
Mhm.
it is a high that I didn't know that I could feel.
Mm.
And so those things have become my measurement
Yeah.
for fulfillment and success, and not necessarily the monetary or the physicality of
Right.
the physical of what it looks like,
Mhm.
between that and this, because again they're very different things.
Yeah. That that's really important, and what a blessing it is that your only comparison is against yourself, right? Because
Yeah,
that's what the experts always say, right? It's just make your comparison that you want to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday,
exactly.
right?
Yep.
Not what so and so did on social media that you're like, oh, how can I do that, right?
Right.
Like make things work for you,
Right.
right? As opposed to trying to be like someone else.
Exactly. It's so much
Oh.
healthier. I remember I
Mhm.
used to, my girls that were on my team would say, I've got to get off social media because I need a break. All my friends, they're vacationing in the south of France and they're getting married and they're doing, and I'm like, girls, here's the thing. Listen, do you remember when your mom has that photo album? She has that photo album on the coffee table, and there's a picture of you at your third, your 3-year-old birthday party, and everybody's really happy, and she captured that moment.
Yeah.
And that moment is forever frozen in that,
Mhm.
album.
Mhm.
Um, She didn't capture the moment where you were having a meltdown the hour before because you wanted to wear your cowboy boots with your tutu
Mm-hmm.
and she already had an
Mm-hmm.
outfit for you.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't capture that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Social media is the same thing. So
Yes.
it's to compare ourselves to what we see out there and just to compare ourselves to even the real things is
Yeah.
such an unfair
Yeah.
comparison because we are so different. Our
Yeah.
ways of doing things, our thought
Mm-hmm.
process,
Mm-hmm.
our life experiences, the things that bring us up, the things that bring us
Mm-hmm.
down, they're so
Mm-hmm.
different.
Yeah.
So it's so unfair to
Yeah.
spend our energy and time
Yeah.
comparing to what other people doing. I'm 100% motivated and inspired when I see other
Mm-hmm.
people succeed at
Mm-hmm.
things,
Mm-hmm.
but I have to find the personal balance in
Yeah.
how do I how do I one not put too much crazy pressure on myself, you
Mm-hmm.
know, being a really driven person and
Yeah.
not set such ridiculous goals that
Yeah.
I never feel that sense of accomplishment,
Yeah.
but also how do I look at what I did and do it better, the
Mm-hmm.
next time and
Mm-hmm.
just get back
Mm-hmm.
up on those uneven bars one more time,
Yeah. Yeah.
and land that, dismount in a ways that I'm really proud of.
Mm. That is oh, that is such a rich share that it's so important for the person listening to take that
Mhm.
away of just focusing inward,
Right.
making it work for you and what your definition of success is, not someone else's,
Someone
what yours
else's.
is. Because also you didn't mention this, but like everyone's on a different timeline, right?
For
And that
sure.
person that shared that highlight, you have no idea
Right.
how much they went through or even what was happening, just as you said, like what was happening right before that picture or
Right.
right after, right?
Right.
Like we have no idea the full context of what's
Exactly.
going on, but it's easy, especially if you're in a state, right? It's so easy to get swept up in that.
Oh, it is. It
Yeah.
really is. It really is. And I think that's why we have to constantly be reminding ourselves of our own story
Yes.
and, the hard work and the discipline and the
Mm-hmm.
challenge and the things that we overcome and the things that we battle in order to get to where we
Yeah.
are and to do the things that we do. We just take it for granted because we're in it,
Yeah.
but there's so many
Yeah.
things that we can that we can take an account of that make us feel really proud and really
Mm-hmm.
special
Mm-hmm.
about who we are, what we've done, and the progress that we've
Yeah.
made, even though we may feel like we have miles to go before we get to where we
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah. So good, Toni. Um, you talked about how, talking yourself off the ledge of that comparison, right?
Hmm.
Comparing your this
Hmm.
to a that from several years ago.
Hmm.
What are the things that you do to manage those fears when they start, when that little part is like, ooh, can you make this as good as that other thing was? How do you manage that?
It's a honestly, it's a mental conversation.
Mm,
This is not that. Don't
yeah,
go there.
yeah,
This isn't that. Stop
yeah.
trying to build
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
Appreciate, I literally have conversations. Appreciate that for
For
what
what
it
it
was.
was.
But that is what it
Mhm,
was there.
mhm.
And and look at this for what it is and find joy and excitement and motivation in this. And if I'm going to pull anything from that, pull the energy that I had that had allowed that to work
Mhm,
and bring that over here,
mhm.
but not allow myself to get caught up in um, this narrative that it'll never be that,
Right.
or I literally have to. What's the conversation you're having, Toni? you know, what's the narrative that you are playing,
Mhm,
toying with? Do you really
mhm,
want to go there? And
mhm.
it becomes a real personal conversation and
Yeah,
self-discovery and
yeah.
saying, you need to check that.
Mhm.
And being my best advocate, but also being really firm with myself about, okay, if you want to go there, then realize this is what you're inviting. You're inviting yourself not to be
Mm.
excited about this future. And if
Mhm.
that's where you want to end up, that's where
Mm.
you're willing to end up, dive on in. I
Yeah.
coach myself often, just because I can get so in my head
Yeah.
about things,
Yeah.
and I don't want to do that, especially if it's going to hinder me from enjoying the evolution that I realize I am in the midst of,
Mhm.
and appreciating for what it truly is.
Yeah. I mean, the self-talk game
Whew,
is,
huge.
it can be a game winner
Or
or a game loser,
it absolutely
right? I
100%.
mean, and here's the thing. Um, just sharing personal experience. Like when you're in the game losing feelings, like
Hmm.
let that be, right? Like let it run its course,
Sure.
right? Because it's important to not have that like toxic positivity,
Right.
because those
Yes.
feelings
Are
are
real.
data and they're
Hmm.
real, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the feeling could simply be, it's just a reminder of how badly you want the thing,
Yes.
right? So let the feeling have its moment, right? And then the next day, a couple hours later, whatever that timeline looks like, and not like a week, right? But
Right.
like, maybe,
Right.
5 to 36 hours, right? Like
Hmm.
let's give it a window. Like let that feeling like have its temper tantrum,
Yes.
and then get to what the truth is.
Yes. I love
And
that.
that's where that self inventory that you've done, that you've talked about in your book, that's where that comes in handy. And
Yes.
even if it has to be like a little post-it note or a little
Sure.
scratch piece of paper, like, let me just write down real quick, like, what are the wins that I've had in the last month,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Um, then do that. Get back to what's true and focus on that. And then get into that place of, okay, I can do this. I can do
Right.
this. I've done hard things before. This is different and it's important. And I know that I can make this happen.
That's it. I
Right.
love you saying give yourself a window of time to have that pity party. I think that's so smart. Put it in here. Okay, we're gonna do this dance right now.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it is real. And these
Yeah.
feelings are real. You can't
Yeah.
ignore them, but you can't let them lord over you. So
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think that's a brilliant idea to say, here's my window to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to change the narrative
Yes.
of what I'm
Yes.
thinking and
Yeah.
talking to myself about.
Yes,
Love that.
yes, yes. So, I really appreciate you talking about how much you do engage in those self conversations, because they are crucial. They
Yes.
are crucial. So, Toni, like I said, the battlefield is paved with all these beautiful gems that you have dropped today of insights and guidance. But I want to take it to a fine point for the person who is listening right now, who
Hmm.
is saying, that's great, Toni, that's great, Kia. I have this goal, but, right? What do you want to say to that person? What guidance do you have for that person that has a goal, a dream, an idea for their life, but they're making fear too important and too big? What's your guidance so they can move forward?
So when I wanted to start I got this from my husband actually. When I wanted to start my PR agency, I was a vice president at a pretty successful agency before I decided to launch mine. And I thought about it for weeks and weeks and weeks,
Mm-hmm.
or months actually, to decide whether I do it. And I would, I am a woman of faith, and I would pray, okay, God, give me a sign,
Mm.
and I'd get a sign. And then I'd pray, okay, God, give me another sign. Okay, give me this sign. I was like always asking for signs. And so it came down to where it was really getting close for me to having to make the decision. And I remember going to my husband's job and asking him, come outside to the car. I need to talk to you. And I'm like, do you really think I should do this? Should I start this company? Do you really? I mean, are you sure? Are you sure? He's like, Toni, you have asked for a sign and another sign and another sign and another sign. He's like, what's the worst that could happen? And I said, well, it'll fail. And he's like, and then what happens? And I said, well, then I'll have to get another job. He's like, and then what'll happen? He's like, and he just took me down this, and
Yes.
then what'll, and then what'll, and then what'll. And he's like, and of what's the worst, what's the worst? And so we finally got to this place where I'm like, okay, the worst that could happen won't kill me. So, um, so I say to the person that's listening, where you're trying to determine, sit down and make a list of what's the worst that can happen, and then what could happen, and then what could happen,
Mhm.
and then what could happen, and then make a list of what's the best that can happen, and the best that can happen, and then what could that lead to, and what could that lead to.
Mhm.
And somehow when you have that perspective, you real there's a lot of, for me, there's always a lot of potential. And then there is this reality that sets in, that the worst that could happen actually would not kill me. It's not going to be as harmful to me
Mhm.
as somehow I create in my head that it would
Mhm.
be, even if it's the fear of shame around something failing.
Right.
That is not finite, and
Mhm.
it is not, I mean, it's not infinite. It's not forever. It
Mhm.
may last for a minute, but it
Mhm.
won't kill me, and I'll get past it, and I'll do
Mhm.
something else. And most
Mhm.
people aren't spending that much time thinking about me.
Girl, I was like, I was fixing my mouth to say that, because that is like that shame and worry of what people are going to think. Be like, look at her. See,
Right.
she took a big, she ate it, and
Mhm.
not in a good way, right? Like,
Right.
oh,
Mhm.
she fell flat on her face. And I say this with love. No one cares as much as
Right.
you think they do.
Exactly.
People are so focused on what they have going on,
Right.
but they're not paying attention to your like entire timeline
Right.
of events. They're not looking at every single social media post of, oh, I did this, well, then I did that, and then this. No one
Exactly.
is thinking about you.
They're not.
And like I said, and I mean that with love.
Right.
The
We're not that
shame,
interesting.
right? The shame is really within us
Within.
of how
Yes.
we're going to feel about ourselves and what that feeling is going to feel like. And
Right.
no lie, it stinks.
Yeah.
It stinks to feel like, man, I really messed that up,
Right.
right? Like
And
that did not work at all the way that I
right.
wanted it to work. And like you said, you're not going to die. It's
Right.
not permanent.
Not
It's
permanent.
not permanent.
And here's the thing, is you don't want to be stuck in this prisoner of perception.
Mm,
And this is a perception that you think, you're not even concrete
right.
in that. So you don't want to get stuck in putting yourself in this prisoner of perception. And the other thing too is, we aren't that interesting that people are
Mhm,
so fixated on us.
mhm,
But I will tell you this, here's what I have come to learn about the lie that I think we tell ourselves when we think, it's going to be the worst if I fail, and everybody's going to think the worst of
mhm.
me, and they're going to think I'm a loser, and they're going to think I
Yeah.
can, and they're going
Yes.
to. Most people are inspired and motivated by the fact that you even tried. A
Mhm,
try, and
mhm,
also the vulnerability that's like, I tried it, but I didn't make it. That is so refreshing to other people. When you hear about other people talk about their failures, they
mhm,
say, I tried this 20 times before I got it right. That says to you, okay, I'm not crazy that I've tried
mhm,
it, 18
mhm.
times and didn't land there. It's something
Yeah.
about being in that authentic place and that authenticity
Mhm,
of succeeding and failing and trying and falling and getting back up. All of
mhm,
those things are really,
mhm,
really good. And when you can love yourself enough to say, I'm okay to fall, and I don't care who sees me, or
mhm.
that they know if that happens, there's something about that that is so empowering, and it sets you on a level, really, 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 to catapult you in places that you
Yes.
would be surprised, because that prisoner of perception will lock you up and hold you down. That perfectionism, that thing where you only feel like you can show up as the rock star
Mhm.
winner, it's a beast, and it will,
Yes.
it'll hinder you more so than you think it's helping you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Oh, Toni. I mean, that was a sermon right there. I mean, that you said it, the prisoner of perception.
yes,
Man, I mean, that'll get it every time. But again, it's the perception that we're creating.
Recreating. Exactly.
No one else
I
is
know.
like, ooh, look at her.
Right.
No one is thinking that. If
Right.
anything, just you said, people are inspired. And in fact, I one quick little story. I
Mm-hmm.
remember, I was talking to a really good friend of mine, and I was like, man, I don't know, like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, right? And I said, I just hate feeling like, the thought that I'm a failure. And she was like, wait, dude, are you serious right now? Because the fact that you've even done what you've done, taken
Right.
the risks that you've taken, like she was like, that is so inspiring to me, because
Yes.
that is not something that I can do. I know I can't, right? So the
Right.
fact that you've done this,
Right.
like that, no way,
I
no way,
know.
no how, right? Like, and you got to do what you got to do,
Right.
right? But yes, the fact that there is someone watching you right now that's like, man, like that's, I'm inspired by that.
Yeah. When I ran the LA Marathon, I often think about that. It's one of the coolest experiences because you have all of these people standing on the sidelines that are rooting for you.
Yeah.
And they tell you to write your name on your shirt, your
Mm-hmm.
number, so that
Mm-hmm.
when you're going by, people can call your name. And there are people that are calling your name, Toni, you can do it. You can do it. They don't care that I'm walking in some places, I'm running, I'm barely
Mm-hmm.
running.
Mm-hmm.
They are motivated. They are motivated and they are motivating me and they're rooting me on because I am endeavoring to do it.
Yes.
And there is
Yes.
something about watching somebody endeavoring to do it that is so invigorating and
Mm-hmm.
so inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes you feel like you have it within yourself to do that thing that you've been, t- you know, toying with the thought
Yeah.
of doing, but maybe hesitant about actually stepping out there,
Yeah.
to do it. None of those people care that I didn't win the marathon or didn't come anywhere close to it. They
Yes.
were just super proud that I was in there making the sacrifice to train myself and then to ultimately do it.
Yes.
So, and honestly, I'm going to tell you this. When I tell my story, I often speak about, in these years now, I often speak about telling my Miss Alabama story. It was a journey for me to get there. It was 18 months
Mm-hmm.
and 13
Mm-hmm.
tries
Mm-hmm.
total between
Mm-hmm.
my very first pageant and when I stood on that stage at Miss USA. And it's not the journey of being Miss Alabama that I talk about. It's really, that's probably the why I
Mm-hmm.
don't really, it's something I don't lead with because
Mm-hmm.
that was only a small part, but the whole journey of getting there and all the failures and failures and failures that I felt like I was facing and things, obstacles that I was overcoming in the process,
Mm-hmm.
that's what motivates people.
Yeah.
It's not saying I start and I won the crown. It's tell me about the journey, the agony of defeat,
Mm-hmm.
the trail, the ups and the downs, the sacrifices. That's what inspires people.
Yes. Yes.
So when we allow ourselves to do that, to share that part,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not afraid of people feeling or judging us,
Mm-hmm.
then we really step into a
Yeah.
place of power. And
Yeah.
honestly, those that are judging really aren't the people that you really, you know, uh, care to have their
Yeah.
approval anyway.
Right. Right. And the judgment is more about them than
Them,
it is about
absolutely,
you, right? It's
100%.
it's them feeling some kind of way that they didn't try,
Exactly.
right?
You're
That
right.
they had the idea that they didn't take action on, right? And I
That's
think
right.
Brene Brown talks about it. It's like people in the cheap seats, you know, th- their
Yes,
opinion doesn't count.
it doesn't
It
count. I
doesn't
know.
count because
I
you're
know.
not out here trying.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
oh, Toni, I mean, honestly, this could be like probably an 8-hour
I know what.
conversation.
I love our conversation so much.
But I'm so thankful for you for sharing your story, a
Absolutely.
piece of your journey with us here today. So I'm so grateful for you for taking time out of your schedule to be on the show today.
Honestly, I'm so honored. I'm so proud of what you're doing. I cherish our friendship, and seeing you grow and seeing you do this and step into this is motivating to me. It's exciting to me, and keep doing it, because this is important, and it's really cool to hear other people's stories,
Yeah.
because it lets us know, one, we're not alone in the
Mhm.
things that we've are facing, and the things
Mhm.
that the challenges that we overcome. And you being so open about your journey is really refreshing. So thank you, and thank you for
Thank
letting me be
you.
a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Toni. So Toni, if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about you, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Toni Purry, at Toni Purry, ToniPurry. My website is tonipurry.com, and my book website is myhypebook.com. So you can find me in those places.
Excellent. And I will include all of that information in the show notes so that you can follow along on Toni's journey now. Again, Toni, thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Thank
And
you.
thank you for following along today on this episode of Courage Permission Slip. If you found us on YouTube, please make sure you like this episode and subscribe so that you can be alerted when new episodes are available. And if you are listening on your favorite podcast platform, please be sure to rate and review so that others can find and enjoy this content as well. Until the next time, please make sure you are making your dreams and your goals bigger and more important than your fears. And we will see you on the next episode of Courage Permission Slip. Bye.
Bye.